Hi everyone, welcome back into the classroom. Well, today I'm going to paint this metal tray. This is an old Nashco tray that I've refinished, given it a coat of primer, and then I just touched up. There was kind of a spot I wasn't too sure of right here. I touched it up with a little sealer that will lock it off, kill any rust or anything that was there, even though this is a really good primer that I use here, a Rust-Oleum type of primer, the metal primer. But anyway, and I have all of that information on our websites for you. But it's a 15-inch tray, beautiful metal tray. I'm using the wood rails here that I used in the last painting I did of the German Shepherd. And I really like adding these to the end of the, clamping them on to the end of my easel board here. And all I did to hold this, because I wanted to paint it on the easel, I usually paint these down on a table with a short handle brush, but I wanted to paint it with a long handle brush where I can get back, maybe get a little bit more casual look to them. And so I wanted to do that. And so all I did was I just put a small little screw there and there through one of the little holes that, like here that you see. And boy, that thing is on there. And then this board is just like you see here. It's just clamped on right there and there and there and there. And I can move it around if I wanted to. And normally I would turn it, but I want to paint it on the easel. So I paint it one way. So when it's hanging on the wall, all the flowers look, they hang the direction that that you have there. So it's a different way for me to do it. I haven't done it this way in a long time, so let's give it a go. Okay, so now what I'm going to have my standard palette out here, Dave's favorites here, and put the full list of everything I use in the video description down below. I have some open medium out. This is Matisse Dervan open medium. I'll grab a little extender out here too. This is the Jansen Art Heritage extender medium. I use the extender when I want the colors to get thin. I use the open when I want the colors to get thick. And just some water. Let's get into it. So I'm going to take some, of matter of fact, so I don't use up all of my white. I'm going to do multiple paintings today. It's early in the day here, and the studio is really quiet, except for the 8 dogs that I have running around here. I have my daughter-in-law's dogs, I have my daughter's dogs, and I have my 2. So I have 8 dogs totally in the building here today. So it's going to be a little bit of a nightmare, maybe just a touch. Let's put in maybe a light tan kind of color. Little, I love it. Little yellow, little bit of green, a little bit of my raw sienna. I love these kind of colors. Now, from this tan, this light tan, I can take this anywhere I want. Start to darken it down a bit. I could take it to a little bit of violet. I'm going to go down a little bit more into the greens and the burnt siennas here. Take this down just a bit more. I want this maybe around a value 7 or 8 probably. I have some ideas, things that I might want to do to the background. So that's kind of a pretty color there. It's a little bit light, but it is kind of, and we got to remember, it will dry a touch darker. So, but I think maybe I want to get it down to about a 7 here. So let's just go a little bit darker and a little more yellow. So those three are working out really nice. But see, once you get this type of color, you can shift it because it's a neutral. You can shift it slightly blue, slightly violet, any color you want. But I'm going to probably put those into the background. That's kind of what I'm thinking. All right, so let's grab my big brush here. And we'll put some extender in it because I want this to go on over the whole background. And I'll mix it up pretty well with the extender. So extender's in it so it'll stay wet for a while. And I just love how this coats over the whole thing. And it has to have a certain amount of body with it to cover this up. I mean, if you wanted to do something really thin, I'm just going to drag it over the edges here too. That'll make giving the outside treatment a little easier at the end. You can give it 2 coats, but I'm going to go fairly heavy here and with the paint and cover it up. You know, it contains a lot of white, which is really easy to get opaque coats with that. But and then I'm just going to add a tremendous amount of background movement in here anyway. So lighten the pressure on your brush and you'll get rid of the brush marks. and it'll smooth it out a little bit. And that just goes on so nice. The Heritage just goes on. The Heritage acrylics just go on so super nice. So let's go work some colors in there. Now, I think I might stick with this large brush in that color for a minute. And I'm going to work something I haven't done with you for quite a while. I put this technique into our Facebook book group. And if you haven't been onto our Facebook group, look into the links for our Facebook group. We have a group, and I think we have like 1,200 painters or so on there. And, you know, you can post photos of your work, and you can do all kinds of stuff. And there's lots of people out there to help you. And, you know, so it's a really a great group. But I put this kind of technique in that I like to do. And some people haven't seen it. I haven't done it for a number of years, so I'm going to bring it back. So I take some green and some burnt sienna, and then I'm going to add some open medium to it. This will make it, and mix it up pretty good. This will make it stay wet, but it will also keep it a little bit thicker than what this is that I just put down. I'm going to wipe some of the excess of this base coat out of this brush here, and just pick this up here, and let's just start applying it. And see, I want it to move in here, and then I want it to get softer as I go out. And it's gonna take a little bit to build it up, but I want this almost like out here, almost like cloudy little green background leaves and stuff like that happening out here. And in here, I want it heavier. So I'll be a little bit heavier with it. Let's then just grab some green burnt sienna. Once I do those colors, let's grab a little bit of open medium. Don't mix it up real well here. I like the colors to also come out a little bit more pure. So I like a tone version of it and a little bit more pure version of it to come out. I like that kind of stuff. And I'm going to go also to a smaller brush here. Put some of this in, maybe a little more burnt sienna. I love burnt sienna. And there, I'm just going to add some of this. I want some, I'm going to put on a tremendous amount of movement here for just a bit. And some of you might think I've lost my mind, but I do like that coming out of a floral, and then I'll soften it. I'll soften it afterwards. I like to put movement in, colors in, and then soften it from there. So we'll put some of that in. I want maybe a touch of a light blue violet here. So we'll take some of, because this is all really, really warm, right? So I like to have a cool in there somewhere as a foil to all the warm here. So I like to pull that through here. Let's pull some of that right on through here. Boom. I just love doing this stuff, especially on these beautiful trays. I just love this color movement and stuff, and working with these thicker paints and stuff on the trays. Now all kinds of ways you can start softening that up. One of the ways is I just take my big brush and just pinch wipe all the colors off of it, and then just lightly start pulling through and putting in some different types of movements and stuff here, and letting what happens happen. I'm going to pick up maybe a little different blue here. Let some of that go through. And I picked up, after I did that, I hit that green. That's okay. If you don't want that to happen, after you make a mark, wipe your brush and it won't happen as much. But I don't mind that going back up there. And when I'm doing stuff like this, see, I can take that back out and get blue back in there. I just add more blue, you know, of that blue that I had that I like. And I like that. I don't like it cutting right here, so I'll put a bit of it showing up over here, just through here a little bit, maybe a touch out into the background. And that would be a pretty blue also to maybe just whisper around. I always like to take some of my colors, if I'm painting a tray, you know, or anything, I like to put some of it around into the background here as well. Okay, so now I'm going to continue to build some more color, some heavier color. Burnt umber And I want this one rose maybe right up here, and I want to build up some heavier color. So this time I use my brush, just real light, and I'll start to build some color here. Sometimes I'll use my finger to just kind of drag this around. I want thick, this is getting thicker on here. So I had some open medium. See, that's the thing about the open medium. As I'm stroking it right here, I can feel that it's still there. You'll feel that slipperiness. But if you're not sure, add it, because you want this to stay wet for a while. So if you're not sure, add it. So let's just add some movement back in here, right back in here. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of playing the colors to build this up. So now I've got that kind of built right there. Now let's talk about our roses. I want white and pink and yellow roses. Yeah, I think those would be pretty. We'll go maybe even a little darker here. Let's take the darker color. Let's actually turn this rose this way. I'll put a bigger, this is a real, I'm using lots of thick colors. Now, you don't normally see me start the roses out this color. And I can sit here and talk to you for 30 minutes. That will still be wet. Okay, you have lots of time. But I start the roses out this way, and I'll show you in a minute why. But heavy colors like this. Okay, this is a little different, right? And so I'm imagining kind of the center here, right? And then we'll go down, maybe a little more of the red violet and stuff down in through here where the shadow of that rose will be, right down in there, right? And let's go back. We'll put another one right in here. And I want this to mix up a little bit. See, if I start to tap it, it becomes a softer color than that one. And don't worry, I have not lost my mind. I usually sit at the last of the day and play with all different kinds of techniques. And this is one that I developed several years ago that I really like. And for acrylic artists, it just keeps the roses really wet for a long time. So you can play a bit with them. Let's put a little rosebud out here. Something like that. We'll put a few other little blossoms and stuff like that out there. Now I'm just going to wipe my brush here. And this will wipe my brush out, run it on your paper towel so you don't have hardly anything in here. And just run the edges here and soften out some of that look. Now, sometimes I will let this completely tack up and then soften into that way. And so if you're not used to painting wet on wet, go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something for a minute and let it tack up. Let the colors start to tighten up. It might take like 20 minutes or so. Let the colors start to tighten up, and you'll be a lot easier for you. But this is wet on wet. This is going to stay wet the entire painting here because I have so much paint. And you have to think of it that way, guys. So many people say, oh, my acrylics dry too fast. And they add water thinking it's going to make it dry longer. No, you actually defeat the acrylics. You make the acrylics dry faster, right? Whenever you're doing a painting, a wall or everything, they always tell you to put on thin coats. Why? Thin coats dry fast, right? And they tack fast, they dry fast. Thicker coats dry slower. So if you have an acrylic that just dries really, really fast, you need to start using more paint. And I used to always tell all of my young acrylic artists in classes and stuff that I do that it's a lot easier to paint if you use paint. So if you have a problem with it drying and stuff, start using more paint, and it won't dry as fast for you. Okay, let's put in just some light. Let's take some of this light background, some of this right here. Let's go a little bit more. Almost a more peachy color. That would be pretty. A little yellow, a little white, some of our background right here. Let's just take this little open medium. I want this thick. And what we'll do is I'm going to leave this more as an open center, so we'll draw the front of the rose right down here. And you can see I'm very carefully, I pick it up a lot of paint, and I'm very carefully pulling it along the front to build the body of the rose there, okay? Just like that. And we'll take this down and make sure we get that shadow. See how quickly and easily that moves? That because there's so much paint on there and it's so wet. Now, some of you won't like that, so let it tack up a bit. You can get the same type of feeling by letting it tack up. But why do I like this? It's for this. I can take my finger here and push in and out a bit, and this is where I get, you know, a lot of you like the real transparency I get to the roses. That's how I get them. I'll work either a soft brush or a soft color like this, and see, I can create the transparency. Even the green, I could pull the green into the rose here and make this beautiful color coming into the rose. And sometimes when I touch again and I get that heaviness back out there like that, I'll leave it, you know, I'll let it happen. I know it happens because I touch too many times with my brush without wiping. But I can also soften some of that out. I can hit that edge, take some of it out a bit, and it's super, super light pressure. And this is one reason why I like to use the long-handled brushes, because the more you step back on the handle of your brush, the softer the tip becomes of the brush. So, see, I can just move and manipulate this around, and I can get a very transparent look. Let's put a little more color into this so we can widen maybe this petal out here a little bit more. So we'll put a little bit of color into it, widen it out a bit, that rose. Maybe a little bit darker right here. Let's give it so that doesn't look lonely there. Let's just push into a bit of the dark and come out here and touch and lift, and that will, see how it just, see that softness that you get there? That softness is really easy to achieve if you have a lot of paint, but it is difficult to paint with a lot of paint. So this type of technique takes a lot of practice, okay? It took me a long time to get used to working with that much paint, but it's just fantastic. Let's put some of this while this is wet here. Let's go down and put some onto this one here. Maybe move into this a little bit. See, I can just use the corners and push this around and see how wet the color is. Wiping my brush, using this if I want this more transparent, just pull through and I make that transparent background of that blurriness to it that makes that transparent look that I like. And I can also just pull this around. Let's get a little bit of that red, violet, and violet in there like we like in there. And let's just put a bit of that out here, right? And maybe a bit right out here, a little heavier, right like that. Just a real pretty, and see, I'll leave, and I want these marks and stuff here to say the rose, right? But I don't want to move that around too much. It happens really, really fast. And if I go touch that again, which you're going to want to, but if I go touch that again, I'll ruin it. I really will. So I'm going to try not to. I'm going to give a little more dark right in here, maybe right down this side, a little bit of that transparency right out here. And see, I don't need too much here to say rose. I really don't. Let's come with a little more of this red violet, maybe a touch of the red here. Okay, so it's a little different. Let's bring that in right in here, right on this outside edge here, I think. And I'll wipe my brush here, and I'll judge it. I mean, do I think that's getting too heavy onto that one side? Do I want to see it more transparent? If I do, I just wipe my brush and pull right back down through it again and take away just a little bit of that red. See, just take a bit of that away. But I do want to keep some of that dark red, especially down here, this red violet, right down here into the shadow and the bowl, where the bowl of this rose is, right down in there. That's what I want. I'm going to paint this more as an open rose, if you haven't guessed that already. I'm going to pull some of this out so I can get some transparency to these petals. I'm lifting off paint, see? Wiping my brush and lifting off paint. I think I lifted a bit too much. I'll put a light pink in there. A light pink here. Just very lightly touch the surface and you'll put it back up onto the surface. That's good. Let's get that dark, that real dark. Sometimes I'll put a touch of green, believe it or not, into that red violet, or a touch of blue that will make it even darker there. So we'll touch into that, and yeah, that might be too dark than I want. So I'll just lighten that up just a bit and just work some of that color. I want this all into this center here. That's what I want. All into this center here. Okay. Maybe a bit more. Right in there, right there, like that. So I've got this real pretty kind of setup of it. You can, I like to touch some of these colors further out into the painting and other areas like this. Let's get some of the pinks, just movements of color out here. It doesn't always have to be leaves or something like that. It can be just marks of the color, compositional marks of the colors, and that's pretty in there as well. Okay, let's take, before I even go build the roses, let's take a little bit of that blue and some of that white and add little touches to that, of that, into the roses there as well. I do like to carry those types of colors. Okay. So we got some of this open area up in there. I'm going to do some blossoms, I think, up in there. And I might even do a little bit lighter blue blossom. But I'm going to do something a little different. Since I invented that technique, I started doing all kinds of other things as well. One of them was restating the background back into the painting again. So I'm going to mix up some of my blue violet here. And with my 3/4 inch brush, I'm going to pull this back through some of this and right up into some of this and restate. And this loosens up. It loosens up your painting. And some of you are probably thinking, Dave, you've got pretty loose already. Pretty loose already. It does. But this is what makes beautiful paintings. It's all of the color movements and stuff that we get. So, let's play a little bit, right? All right, so when we can blur that with our finger, we can blur it with the brush. I could take a little bit of light, some of my background here, since I mixed that extender with it. See, it's still wet. We could take some of that blue and some of that as a softer color through some of this. Color, the beauty of color is what's important in these things. Just get some beautiful colors and stuff. So what you're looking at through here is you're seeing the inside, you're seeing the roads. We're going to maybe put a blossom or so up here. Going to put a little bud out here. We'll put some leaves and stuff in there as well. But I want to get some strikes of darker. Let's take the green and some of this darker. I want to get some real nice strikes of darker color here. And let's wipe my brush, drag a little bit of that into the rose to blur it. I like this type of blurring because that just gives so much interest to the petals. So when you look at a lot of roses and stuff that I paint, you see this undulation of color in there, and this is how I do it, working these colors back and forth like this and putting them in there. Because when I start to draw the petals and start adding the white, it gets a little more difficult to do some of this. So now's the time to do that. So let's go back to our smaller brush here for just a minute, and I'll show you. I add a little bit of light to this. All right, let's come right back out here. And I'll show you. See, we're just going to draw the petals here, just like this. And we're going to leave some of that movement. Now, sometimes I'll just push that movement in and out, because this is all really wet. Sometimes I do it with a brush, sometimes I do it with my finger, but it's all really wet here. So I'm going to build right up in here, pink into this background color, and I'm going to build an area that I can build the front of the rose. Thicker color, like right in here. Boom. Right in there. And I'll let the color, I won't reload, I'll let the color kind of run off my brush here as I start to paint this other shadow side here. I'll wipe my brush, and so I don't have hardly any paint on it, and then I'll manipulate it, move it around into that shape of the bowl. You got to be careful. We don't want to put on so much that we lose our translucency to the rose, okay? So I'm going to make this more of an open rose, so we'll keep this a little bit heavier there in the front, but it's so thick it's going to take me a couple times to build the front part of this rose here, like that. And I think I've got that a little big, so all I have to do is just take some dark and redraw it and pull down and get rid of some of that edge. So, and this is also really nice. You can just say, okay, I'm just going to drag that right back down and restate that front edge again. Maybe I want this to look more smaller petals, almost like a peony type of rose or something, you know. So let's build this just a bit. We'll put one right in here, and we'll just lift off right away because I don't want to lose that transparency that's there. So I don't want to drag white everywhere. That just gets rid of it. Here, I did like that dark. And if you take it out, you just go back and put it back in. Put in some of that dark again. We're going to go around this way. Let's just take now it's toned down quite a bit. See, it's not the white. Let me put a little dollop of white out here so you see it's not white. We're down here in an 8 or so value. Okay, so we're not white. We don't want to get too much white on these things out here too quickly. They will destroy the depth of the rose, and it's not necessary here. So we need just a little indication of the shapes and stuff. We don't need a lot. And if I want to really pop it out, I'll put dark and do that negative painting technique I've showed you guys so many times. We can do that. But let's just build this in. Let some of that green right now come right into that leaf, or into that petal, excuse me. Just let it come in there. Here. Because this is what's going to give them that translucency here. Wipe my brush, grab it again, and pull that green in a little bit. There. Now see, so you got that green and that color running in there, and I want to soften this one in. I'm looking for a little bit of the color blurring and stuff in there coming in. That's what makes the beautiful translucent roses here. Let's just pull some of this out a little further there. Now you can start seeing those outside petals. You can see I don't really need a tremendous amount of stuff there. Let's work on this one. Let's just pull some of this. And see, just the lightness of my background can come through and pull it. Now, I'm going to lift off some of this dark paint here. Wipe my brush. And just pull that in so I can get the feeling of those petals. Here, leave some of those greens and stuff in there. Those are pretty. That's really pretty in there. There's a thing we say when we're casual painters, and you need to remember this. Less is more, right? You've heard that with other artists and stuff, right? Okay, we don't need to touch it too many times. You don't need to go in there and, try to just paint this busy rose. You just need to suggest it. That's all. So see back here, I can just take some light color like this and just suggest. I don't need to paint a whole bunch back there. I can just suggest these back petals and they'll be there. I like a little bit of green in that. let's take a little lighter, softer green. Just push some of that right in there. Right into that. See how it just anchors that? That's pretty nice. Let's go over and work on this guy so we don't forget him too much. Let's give a little heavier, a little open medium, a little green, a little dark, right in here, right? Get that feeling. Get this nice turn here for the inside of the throat of this little rosebud here. A little bit more turning in there. Right, there we go. Blur some of this. You know, this is, I love this. Even go back to my 3/4 inch brush here and just blur some of that through. Just lightly, lightly, lightly pull through. I don't call it blending because I'm just pulling once or so to blur some of the back edges here. Wipe your brush, light pressure, just pull in and blur it through. And that creates that blur which sets it further back, right? So, yeah, we got all kinds of good stuff. Sometimes I'll take my palette knife in there and work that in there, and that just works really nice. Now, I like everything about this rose. Maybe a little more shadow right up in here into the front, right up in here a little bit. I like everything that's happening, though, in that rose. Maybe a bit of this Diarylide. Diarylide's so pretty to add. A little bit of glow that it adds into a rose is really pretty. Diarylide Indian Yellow is a really pretty one as well because it's a translucent pigment. So just gives that little bit of glow in there. Especially since you start to add the whites. Once you start to add more whites, it's super easy to opaque something. So you have to be careful. So we want to, establish some nice glow here. Establish some beautiful little glow to the rose, to the petals here. Something like that. Let's put just a bit of a glow in here. A little bit more. And the second that we start painting with more white, this is really going to change. So we want to make sure we have enough. Let's get maybe a little bit more right across here. Right across like that. Right out into that blur and let that green go in there. Maybe just a touch more right across the top so that goes in there. So I'm building that, but I want to restate that bowl just a bit more in there. And I really like the mottled nature. That's what I call the mottled nature. It doesn't look like a stroke, so I tap it like several times, light and touches in there to give it a mottling instead of a stroke. And that's what makes the roses look so pretty. So try not to have too many like long marks or anything like that in them. That's what will kind of destroy their look a bit. Let's come up here to the front, okay, and we'll build up a little more white right up here and let that just hit some of that green. We'll just pick up that edge, that petal edging technique. I don't want to lose all of that right in there. So I just want to hit the edge here and just kind of draw the edge of that petal right there. Maybe that's all it needs. Maybe it needs just a little bit of a mark back here to say enough. Maybe just a bit right here. That will say enough back there. That just puts that. Let's get a little green and pink in our brush here. And pull that through here. Keep that softness right there. Right? Bit of that softness. Sometimes I'll pull out. Let's get a little green in this pink. Sometimes I'll pull out here. And let's just push that around. Sometimes I push with my left and my right hand because they're each a little different. And I try not to set up a rhythm. You know, you're trying to avoid a rhythm. Let's go big brush here for a minute. Pull that out. Get that movement back out there. Now, I've lost some of my dark, so I'll have to put that back in, but I like that movement. Matter of fact, I'm going to drag this movement right up into that rose on that side a bit more, because I like that. And I do a certain amount of playing with it. I do. Here, let's let some, see, I like that. That little bit of color showing up here and there. Let's build, and it's still very wet, and I can make it so easy on myself if I go have a cup of coffee, wait about 10 minutes, and come back and paint on this. As these colors tighten up, it's easy, they get easier to paint. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll work around to other flowers for a bit. Well, see, this one's tightening up a bit. I can feel it. So, you know, I'll work around to these as that's happening so that I'm giving some time for those to tighten up. Now, on the wood, it's going to tighten up faster than it does on the metal. And that's because the acrylics soak down into that early, you know, when you use canvas prep medium, it's slightly porous. It'll take some of it down in there, and some of that extender and stuff goes down in there and holds it. On the metal, everything sits on top, and so it dries really, really fast. So painting on a metal is quite a bit different than, and a different feeling than painting on a wood surface or a canvas surface. So, and they're all different, and you're going to have to practice them, you know. Practice, practice, practice. Practice is the key to everything here. That's kind of a pretty little, boy, just don't do too much to that one, Dave. You know, just let that just kind of sit out there. See, I love that blurriness. Now, I could take a bit of pink and blur from the base up and increase my bowl shadow, just like that. Let's pull one more little bit right there. And just leave that, maybe leave that mark there. Maybe a touch more right here in the front that will bring it forward here. Yeah. You can, you know, you could redirect the bowl, just a quick little mark down like that to make it look like it has the bowl again. If you take off a little too much like I just did, you can just come back with a quick little stroke and put some of that back in there. I'm going to take a little bit heavier, so I'll load up a little heavier paint and a quick, don't be nervous, a real quick strike of it right there. And I like that. Maybe you wipe my brush and just soften this edge. Just soften that edge a bit, and I like that. There's all different kinds of ways. Sometimes I'll just pull up like this and round that up and touch and lift off if I want to blur that up. I'll show you all different kinds of things. Touch and blur, put a little bit of your pink in there. You know, a strike of yellow would be really pretty in there. A little strike of yellow in there. And then I'll reset that highlight. So sometimes, but you see, I don't go over and over and over it again. I'm striking each one once, maybe twice, and getting out. I'm going to soften this outside edge. That's kind of a pretty little rose now. I like that building up a little heavier there. A little bit of yellow showing up. Maybe just a touch of yellow over here as that's fading off on that side. I could put some darker green, burnt sienna and green. Little, like a calyx or something right here. You know, some calyx marks and stuff here. That would be pretty. You know, just little green leaves and stuff here. That would be pretty. Right out there like that. And you can make them more specific for the shape of a leaf or something. I don't think I'm going to do that, but let's put that in. I'll just wipe my brush and I'll bring in some light right into that. And none of that really worked there right now. So what do? I just wipe my brush here like this, and it didn't work the way I wanted it to. I played a little too long. I'll admit it. I played a little too long. So I'll take some light color, that blue that's right in there, and I just reset my blue. That's all. I'm just going to reset my blue right back through there. And then this time, we'll take some green and burnt sienna, this time. We'll drag that right back through in there, and we'll put some of this stuff in, and we just won't play with it as much. I might want to wipe my brush, pick up a bit of the edge right on that corner so I can maybe draw another little transparent petal right out here. Let it pick up some of that transparency there. That's kind of pretty. So then the transparency takes it further back. This other edge here, I could bring this edge up a bit more. And you don't want to, when you're painting with a lot of paint, and I could feel it on that, you don't want to push real hard because you'll dig up. You have to use super soft pressure or let it dry up a bit. Does that make sense? And it is super wet, and sometimes these trays are really hard to paint if it's super wet. So let it dry up a bit, and then you can do that. I'm going to soften that line, blur that line just a bit. So that's really pretty. Let's go back up here. We'll grab a little bit of our quinacridone, a little bit of our pink. Let's come up here, reset the light. Now see, this is a little more stiff, and so it's easier to paint right now because it's starting to become a little bit stiff. And we're, what, 40 minutes into it. So it's been there for about 30 minutes, and now the paint is starting to get just a little stiff, and I can use this, now the stiffness, to draw and shape up some of the petals a bit here and put on a prettier part of the rose. Let's get brave here. Put in just a bit of that yellow and restate that again. Here, a little bit lighter here, and just restate a little more white right up in here. Let it just pick up into some of that. That's good. We'll pull down, build up this bowl right here a bit, right up in here, pull through. Now I'm building the light bowl, and then I'm just going to push this. See how I can push it and blur it some. This is where I get those real soft looks to the roses that some of you like. Now, if I feel that it's too stiff, then you take your brush, rinse it with a little bit of extender and pull through, and that will blur it again. So if it gets too stiff, you have to loosen it up, and extender is what you use to loosen it up. If it's not stiff enough, don't add extender, you'll make it worse. Okay? Only go to the extender if you feel that it's not moving or you're fighting it and it's too stiff. It got a little too stiff on you. Okay, so that's the key to it right there. All right, so let's take some light pinks right here and the whites, and we'll just kind of have a little open medium, light pinks, whites, kind of model this together. This is what I love, modeling it together. And with that modeled look, I'm going to come back here and just add a few marks to start to suggest some petals and stuff. Model color here, right? Just some modeled color. Here like this. Push that right into the wet. And that pushing in, I call it the incorporation in of the color. And I can go light and dark. So I took out a little too much dark there. So I'll just push in a little bit of dark right in there. And build that back up here. A little bit of these pinks. Here. A little bit of that movement here. Back in. I like that. A little more white into some of these pinks here. Just, start to give the impressions of little petals coming down into the flower here, right? Now, it's very, very easy, and I'm getting close. It's very easy to go too much, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to also restate with some darks in there. Model those darks in and through, and that will loosen up your center a bit. Get you back to almost that peony rose there, right? So if you get too much, you can do that, and then you can come back with just a tiny bit of paint here and push in some of those little marks or petals and the centers and stuff here. Here, like these are getting right down in there, and then grab some of your darks and tap them in to loosen it all back up again, right? And let's grab some of this. I got a little too much. I like that, a bit of the darker hole almost right in there. So I'm going to push that back in. It's a little more relaxed. But if you feel like it's too much of a hole, you can do whatever you want. Add whatever you want back in there. Here. There, like that. Let's just soften that just a bit here. There, like that. Okay. And I'm going to build that front. I really want this to be a nice queen rose, so I'm going to build her up a bit more right in here. And I want that gold and that yellow in there. So I'm going to blur this in a bit more paint, a bit more movement right in there. Bit more stuff. Let's get another set of a white petal right there. Right there. See, I just pick up that light on the edge. I don't need to do anything here but to just basically draw the edge of a petal. That's all I need to do, because most of the petal is all done in that blurriness there that I like. It's all done there. Let's get a little bit lighter, a little bit of this yellow here, right in there. And we'll work this edge a bit, soften some of that edge. See, I'll just touch it. If I feel like I've got too much of a ridge, it's not soft, I'll reach up into the shadow and pull it down, and it'll soften the edge. That's a good trick to remember. Reach up into the shadow and pull it down into that ridge to soften it. And let's just take a little bit of pink, set that pink in there. Pretty little lights here. Sometimes that pink and a little bit of that green is so pretty. It's the grayness, a little open medium. Get that grayness back into some of that. Here, helps that rose anchor right in there. I'm going to reset that bowl there. That's good. I like that little bit right there. So, and you know, at any time you can reset darks. I'm going to reset a dark in here to get a little bit more blurry, casual nature in there. Right? That looks pretty good. But avoid, you know, painting with too much white. That's what kills your roses faster than anything else. It's too much white. Let's put a little bit of an edge here, so you see that rose turning up that way. So this is the light side of the rose. So I'll bring some of the edges of these little outside petals out just a bit. Just a bit more. But I don't always like to lose that beautiful shadowing. So sometimes I just come back and just restate it again so I don't lose it as I build this rose to what I think is going to be a pretty one this time. And I restate quite a bit, so let's get that yellow that we lost in there. Get that back in there. As you build this, and we'll build some of that yellow back in there, right? But, you know, it all depends. Any one of those layers in there, you could stop at that rose. But, you know, on a tray like this, on a beautiful tray like this, I like to build the roses several times, so that they have so much depth and so much interest to them because it's a beautiful tray. It's not just a board or a canvas. It's a beautiful heavy metal tray and so I'll build on it and work on it a bit to get the right feel or look to it that I want this to have. I like that. And I do like painting on the easel with this guy. I like that. I'm fighting that front edge just a touch. So what I do, like I said to you, when I do like this, I pull down and I'll reset some of that front edge, loosen it up. I like sometimes just the casual brushwork you can get, and sometimes when you pull too much, especially if you're an old stroke artist like me, you can really hurt the rose by getting it too stiff. So I'll loosen it up here. Just loosen some of that up like that. That's pretty good. We'll grab a little more light. Let's just pull a light stroke right in there. It's kind of pretty. See, that little light edge makes it look like a light little petal right there. We'll push here. I just roll over on that little edge and I'll start to edge and build these petals just a bit more. Here. Just like that. Should I put another light pink petal in there? That becomes the... And you can always try it. If you don't like it, take it back out, you know. That's what I always tell my students. It's paint. You can... I got to add a little open medium to this. It's paint. You can take it back out. Push it back in and out. You know, and this is how you learn, how you try. That's pretty. And I like that back in through there. I don't want to touch that too much. So that's kind of pretty. And let's go very transparent. Lots of open medium, some greens, some pinks, some darks. And let's just give a idea of this side right in here. We'll blur that out and we'll blur this whole side out there like that. Letting most of this rose, matter of fact, we might even let it go even darker right back down over here. And just swirl that out like that here. And just let that rose, maybe a bit of that. I love that yellow. So maybe a bit of that yellow combining in over there. And then I'll set that yellow in right in here with that lighter color right in there. And maybe an idea of a light, just a few lights coming down. Maybe the idea of a few light little petals here. Don't need that much. We come up to the front here a little bit more. Right up in there. I like the movement, so I like to get this movement into the rose. So, you know, the rounding of the bowl and the up and down of the front bowl petals. And that movement there. But I could have a lighter little petal right here. Just ideas of a few, right like that. That's kind of pretty. Right there. This one feels a little straight or a little too stiff, so we'll round it up a bit. Right there, maybe a bit of the green. So you see some of the big ones, especially like this one. Now, the next rose, I won't paint it as much because this is the one that's the queen that's gonna control the composition here, right? That's the queen. So we might have, I'll take some extender. I'm gonna go over to the shadow side with a bit of just a light color right out here. And so I'll use some extender so it doesn't have as much power. And I'll just whisper in some of the edges of those petals and just pull in here, just like that. So it doesn't have as much power. Maybe a bit of the quinacridone gold, or excuse me, the quinacridone violet and the yellows here. Just push some of that in there like that. That's kind of neat. I like all of that. I think this one right here, as I look at that, that encroaches on that center a bit. So let me open it up, because I can always put it back. Let me open this center back up just a bit rounder right here. Let's see if I like that better. That is prettier. See how it opens up the center a little bit? So this one petal was pushing that way a little bit. I always look for that roundness, and I'll move a bit of the softer pink in there to help set that movement there. That's prettier. Let's go just a little bit lighter right in here. Maybe too much light here. There, like that. That's kind of pretty. Yeah, let's go darker again. Right in here, right into that center. And up and around and into that just a bit, giving that rounder movement there. That's kind of pretty right in there. I like that one, like that one. So let's keep this one up here more simplistic. We'll go open medium, some of our light pinks here. And this one's tacked up more, so it's going to be really easy to paint. So, and we're going to go kind of quick on it because it's not an important rose. It's just part of the roses here, but it's not super important. So we'll grid some yellows. We'll put a bit of that in, right? Let's grab some of our darks. We were going to push some darks down here, push right into there. Push that around a bit. We'll leave that real soft back. I like that real soft back on it. But I'll take some of this color with some light, slightly different than what we used on the other one. And we'll draw in a few light petals, let some of that transparency happen there. We can even push that transparency a bit right up to that edge there. We'll let that dark sit back there. I kind of like it. It's different. I like it. Build a little more light right down here. Build the front of that rose right there. Maybe push this back, pull. So sometimes I'll just pull that center right down into the petal and remove the strong edge of it. I like to do that. Let's just put a bit of light right there, like that. That's pretty. I would love to see a little more of that green coming in there. I'll show you guys how we can do that. Let's go a little, just a light little pink, and we're going to go very suggestive over here. Very, very suggestive here on this rose. That other one is suggestive, but it has a lot of structure, which makes it the queen, right? We'll put a bit more light right here. Bit of light right there. Maybe a light petal, so we'll push to the edge, pick up the edge right here. A light little petal right here. Little bit of structure right there into that one. And maybe just a hint of petals and stuff out there. We'll let that, but it could go, just because of the lightness of this other one, could go a little bit lighter right here in the front. Right in there. Right like that. And I'm going to leave the edges here very undefined. So here, round it up a bit. I think that's kind of pretty. Maybe a bit of the dark right here to redefine that center just a touch. Right in there. Yeah. Now, let me get some of that with a little bit of extender. Because I'm going to use a green and my burnt sienna, and with a little extender here, I'm going to wash that so this is thin back up over the front of this rose, right in here, maybe all the way back up towards that bowl right there, and incorporate those colors. Don't blend them, just incorporate them together so it's glazing it back. Let's re-deepen with a little bit of our nice contrast red violet right here. Let's re-deepen this shadow right in there that we really like, right into that center part of that rose there. That nice, beautiful, deep shadow. And I'm using just extender right now so everything stays a little thin. Let's just restate a little bit of our golden color here. Right in here. See, this is all wet. I can manipulate all of that. But I don't want to do too much because that just stiffens up the rose if you do too much, right? And then we'll take some light, a little bit of mottled color. We'll pull and stop and push in and out just a bit. And that keeps that green right there in that petal. Let's go out a little bit more here to round the edge of that petal, the tip of that petal, just like that. We'll draw another out here, maybe pull out just in and out just a bit. Pull it in just a touch here. Like that. So I get that green in there. That's what I was looking for. And then we'll go with that pink and yellow and a little edge of the light. We'll push this lighter petal right there. There, I like that better. We'll grab a tiny bit of this light. Let's draw this petal down into the bowl a bit more. That looks pretty good. And then, so sometimes after I go around and work these, I always come back and rework my center rose again. I always like doing that. Boy, I like that. Should I push that? Boy, don't do it any more than that, Dave. That worked out kind of neat. Let's take it slightly darker over here. Just a bit. A little bit of that golden glow right there. That's kind of pretty. Yeah, maybe a touch of this light coming out there. Just the tiniest bit, see? Tiniest bit. There. Like that. That's kind of pretty. Those are kind of pretty there, like that. Yeah, now, to help some of that transparency and stuff, you can always back paint. There's a technique that I call it. As a matter of fact, if you go to the channel, up on the main page of the channel, there's off to one side, not up at the top, but down in where I have the list of videos, you know, different categories. There's a little kind of a little spyglass kind of thing, magnifying glass as the search engine. Put in negative painting. This is negative painting. I'm going to come back in and back paint right in, maybe a little blue and violet into that. Back paint my shadows, deeper, darker shadows in and around some of these other things here, which will increase the translucency of the roses, but it also allows me to clean up any edges or anything like that I might want to on the rose and reshape and do all this kind of stuff. So if I wanted to increase some contrast right in there, sometimes I'll just come in and tap and negative paint like that. Sometimes I do it with just paint itself, and sometimes I'll thin it out with a little bit of extender so that I don't get too wild and crazy with it. And so we'll just grab some of this and pull some of this around right here, around that edge. See, it just drops that it cleans up that edge and draws a really nice edge. You could use it like right in here, you know, just a little bit of a line, carry some of that stuff out here. Green and a little red violet is a super dark color, even a tiny bit of blue. This is a super dark color that can get a lot of contrast in, especially down in through here. So you can see that just really contrast everything, right? Let's drop some right around in here. Zoom right in there. Take out that one little bit right there. That just does. And see, I can come back in here, a little blue. Some of that blue's dried up, but a little light green, maybe a little blue, a little bit of the color, lighter color in there. And this is what I do. I start breaking some of that up here as well. So you don't need negative paint here. Like maybe I'll drag some of that right into that edge of that rose. And it loosens up the rose, see? So this is what we call you're painting and you're getting those lost edges. So I might come in here and just do this and pull some of that in, right in here, and lose some of the edge of that rose. Maybe right back here, pull some of that in, lose some of that edge right there. It's a beautiful look. Now, we could add some smaller blossoms. Let's just take a look at some smaller right here. Let's just go, what color should we do? I really want to do kind of a light violet kind of blossom. I think those would be pretty with this here. So let's just try. Let's try a few of them. I love blossoms with the roses. Violet to white here. That might be a little too bright. So we just take some of that off, push it in. That blue's still wet. Let's go back to a softer, just transparent kind of white. Just a real soft one here. Paint through it a couple times to help soften it out. And then you can put its edges of its petals in with more distinct paint, but grab this. And push some in here. It's kind of a pretty little flower. We'll go some small ones and stuff as well. Just some small little ideas. Simple. Mottled brush, mottled color, not too much to them. Just little marks of color here. A little bit of violet in it. A little yellow, a little violet. Right? Let's push one right in here. Let it mix a touch with some of that green right there. Just a little one. Pulling always to the center there. There we go. Build the color. And again, this is really wet because I just put in some of that dark. So when it's really wet, if you're a pure acrylic painter, that gets hard to paint. So sometimes it's nice to let it dry down just a bit before you try to do more things on it. Here I'm just going to give some quick movements. These are, these just carry color. Their job is to just carry color, lighten up the design, add some background interests and stuff back through there. Then we'll add some leaves and stuff as well. But first, let's take a little bit of burnt sienna into their centers here. Just a bit. And then some yellow oxide here. Some yellow oxide. There we go. A little bit of that. There. And then some yellow oxide and white. Maybe I always like to touch a little bit of the Hansa Yellow as well. Touch that in there. Get just a bit. There. Yeah, that looks nice. Little touches. Simplistic little touches. And you can, a good thing to do, especially like with them, is to take like a light blue or a little, you know, from that background. We had a bit of the violet in there. Just some kind of real light color here. And add that as well into the blossoms here. It grabs some of that harmony. See some of that color that comes through there, right? So grab some great harmonies. Soften some of them out a bit. There. That's a little too heavy in the blue, so we'll just blur it out. There, it's good. And then we're going to add some just simplistic soft leaves. So I'm going to use just extender, just some extender, a little yellow, a little burnt sienna, a little green, extender, and we'll come through. And we don't need a whole lot, but I want to have just a few of them kind of showing up, because you expect to see, we have sometimes I do just very casual like greens and stuff, and I don't do leaves. I let the leaves be very impressionistic and just marks of color, and then sometimes I put a few little things out. So we'll do a few little leaves out this time that we'll see here. Some of them going around. I touch, and then I wipe them so they soften out a bit. Here. There. Just like that. Push some of that around. Maybe a pine green and a bit of yellow oxide or lighter yellow. Put a little open medium in this. It stays a little thicker. So it's yellows, greens, some whites, a little Hansa maybe. And you can give some strikes of lighter color here through the center. Like these are leaves and stuff up in here. Right? And you can give them a bit more of an edge. I believe that, you know, you should paint your leaves with the techniques and stuff that you paint on your flowers, so the two of them go together. So if your flowers have a little edge, your leaves should as well. You can push a little shadow, though, underneath that one. Pull that out. It's kind of pretty. Some light little colors here. That's kind of pretty. A little bit of green stuff. So even if it's real dark in an area, just break some of it. Pull some green in. You know, just break some of that. Like right in here would be a good area, right there. Boom. Bring in some different greens. Right? Yeah, maybe. And you can always go back around with some of your darks again. Like right in here would be pretty. Just pull some of that out right there. So it makes such a pretty little rose. Right, maybe bring that right back out in here as well. Let's get that burnt sienna and green. I love that. Just nice casual. Let's get that color in there, right? That beautiful color. Yeah. Let's just push a... Boy, that background that I originally started an hour and 15 minutes ago is still wet. That's great. With that extender, when that thicker paint goes on there, it stays wet, guys. That's the key. A lot of people say, oh, my acrylics dry too fast. And they do if they're thin. But thick paint takes a while to dry. Does that make sense? But it is hard with an acrylic, and especially, you know, I came from oils, so I painted for years with oils. So I was used to painting that wet on wet. An acrylic artist, it might take a little bit for you to get used to that. I'm going to rinse that green out of my brush for a minute. When I do that, I always put it back into extender, because if you don't, the water can cut through any of your layers really easy. So you got to be careful. I'm going to lighten up a bit of these forward blue petals here, just a bit here. Some of these, maybe take a mark or two of a little bit of blues or so in there. Casual. What is it? I don't know. Maybe it's another back little petal flower back in there. Just stuff. Sometimes I just take my brush and just drag stuff. I like that. Just drag those feelings there. Drag those edges. Blur those edges. Blur some of that yellow there. I like those. Sometimes I'll tap little light spots around. I like to take sometimes that light with my knife and drag little spots of it around as well. Call these the little sparks. The little sparks lighten up. Sometimes you're painting, if you feel that it's a little bit too structured or something. These little sparks really help. Little sparks of color. Just through the painting, just lighten it up. And you can adjust them, get too heavy where it is, take some of them out, but leave some of them around. A little bit of green, blues, some of those little color sparks here. I like that stuff. A little bit. Here. It's kind of pretty. You know, I feel like I might want, just after I just did those, I feel like all of a sudden I might want a bit lighter right up in that front of that rose there. So, especially if that is so light, let's just take an edge of this light. See if we like that. Little bit, pulling that part of the rose a little bit farther forward. See, I'm always, even when I really love it, and I do, I love this one, I'm always willing to come back and touch it again if it needs it. But it's each mark that I make, I realize I've got to go smaller or else I'll destroy the look that I've worked so hard to put in there. So, yeah, that's kind of pretty. Yep, right in there. That's pretty. I like that little bit of pull down right there. Brings that right back. And I think it's a little dangerous, but I think I'm going to just touch into this right in here and loosen up that edge there just a little bit more. That, yeah, kind of like that. Real soft. That's kind of pretty. It's kind of pretty. Now, for the outside here, we could go, traditionally I go with these real kind of gold, but I'm leaning towards maybe a real soft green, or that something that's right in here. This, and you can do, I'm going to keep it thin here for a little bit while you brush in. Now, you can always brush in a color like this, okay? And this is the burnt sienna and green. We'll probably go a little more green. Brush in a color like this, which will give you a lot of contrast. And then what I generally do is I'll soften it back with the gold. That's why I put the gold out here, the gold. And so you've seen me do that before. I've done it on all kinds of trays here on the channel. So you've seen me do that before, but I'll drop this in. This will give contrast to it and a beauty to it. And then when this is dry, I'll brush some of the gold over it, which will, I think, kind of complete it up, I think. So I'll put on a contrasting color here, like this, which you can see just draws your eye all the way around. But then I'll soften it with some gold, I think. That's what I'm going to do. And I like to do that. I like to look at it as I'm putting this on. Sometimes I like this to come out a little more green in a few areas. Sometimes a little bit more burnt sienna in a few areas. And then we'll brush in some golds and stuff to soften it. Or you can leave it high contrast, whatever you want. A little bit of water here to let this flow. Just poke it into the corner there and work that around. So hopefully you like that technique. Let's just blur that edge a bit. Boom. You like that technique of loosening it all up. Now, I built it up quite a bit and I got rid of that, but this one I left more loose. So you don't have to add as much as I did in the front of that, okay? So, it's up to you. You can do a whole bunch of different techniques with it. But have some fun with it. These are a fun way to paint the flowers. So it's using thin extender first and then adding some other color with it and stuff. And I paint and sell a lot of these trays. Those of you that would like to collect some of these trays, you can go over to the JanssenArtGallery.com, and I have entire areas of trays, and I'm going to be painting several of those. And what we do is my wife and I donate all of my paintings to the Jansen Art Foundation, basically, so that it funds it, which funds this channel and does everything. So everything that is sold off of that in that gallery stuff goes into the funding of our channels and stuff here for the art education and stuff, so we can continue providing you with quality lessons, all for free here, okay? And we appreciate your support. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button and that like. Put that like and that comment down there. Thank you so much. Some of you I see on every single one of them. And we're going to figure out some way to say thank you to you. And I hope that all of you subscribe to the channel, like the videos, and like the teaching. I try to bring you a lot of different genre because it's all art. It's all connected, okay? And so I'm going to soften this. You'll see some final photos of it. Those of you that are member or part of the membership of it, I'll put final photos of it and stuff. And then if you want, go over and join us on Facebook on the Academies of Art is what it's called, Academies of Art. The links are always in the video description. Come join it over there. Post your photos, ask questions, and all that kind of stuff, okay? All right. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.